Oh, Julie, you made it.
I did.
Yeah, that's great.
Nice to see you.
Good, good. Nice to see you too. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi,
So, hi,
everyone.
everybody. Hey, Sama, you look very warm and sunny.
Yes, you do. Last day of sun in Brussels, so I can't. I really need to be outside.
You take what you can get, right? Excellent.
Exactly.
I'll
Yeah.
just I'll just have to check my microphone, make sure. Oh, it's working, I think. All right. I'm assuming you hear me well. All of you can hear me. Okay, yeah, very good. So welcome everybody. I'll just wait another minute or so, see if others are joining, and then we'll do our invocation. A couple of you won't be able to make it today, and of course our Australian friends are not joining live. So hello to all those in the recording. There we go. All right, so if you're comfortable where you are, just close your eyes. And you need to leave around 4, Sama, that's no problem. I will endeavor to be close to on time today. Got a hard stop at 5. So I'll put myself out at 5 or a little later, that's fine. Okay, good. All right, so if everybody's comfortable, then you can gently close your eyes or lower your gaze, and we'll begin with our invocation. So beginning by feeling the feet, whatever your feet are touching. Sense the earth below and become aware of the base of the body and the back of the head, and the crown of the head, and the space between the brows. If you feel like it, you can bring your hands to your heart and let your either hands join together or just rest a hand on your heart to feel the heartbeat. Om Shri Ganapataye Namaha. Om Shri Saraswataye Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we each feel protected. May what we do here bring mutual benefit, be mutually uplifting. Let there not be any obstacles ahead of us. And especially may what we do here together bring peace and harmony to those around us. Whenever you feel ready, open your eyes. And welcome to everybody. So thank you for questions. There were a couple of questions in the chat. And of course you can, let me go back to the chat. You can of course ask your questions here or again, or depending on whether you feel it's being answered or not. we get a little distracted sometimes, the royal we. And so what I'd like to do is just begin with what we call hangover questions, things that are not clear. So let me just double check the questions that we got already in the chat, since those were the bigger burning issues that we want to identify, and then we'll jump into what is coming up at the moment, all right? So planets squaring the nodes, if I haven't missed something, I think that was the one that was the first question in the list. So planets squaring the nodes. What I might do is just share a chart. Let me just come up with, oh, hang on. I'm going to just find a chart. Did somebody in the chat have a planet square the nodes? That way I can look at the chart from who asked the question, who is
It was
the
Georgia, me, Georgia.
is it you, Georgia? Well,
Yeah.
let's have a look then using your chart. I'm going to just pull that up now, and that way we can see it directly. Okay, good. So let me come back here and share it with you all. Boop, boop, boop. There we go. All right, so here we have Georgia, and that's 7th of September, 1985 at 16:43 in Rochdale, UK. Is that correct? All right, so that gives us a south node in Scorpio at 10 degrees 49 and the north node 10:49 of Taurus, and we have two. Yeah, that's it. I think we were looking at this chart, or the royal we again was looking at this chart as a great example. So here we have the Venus opposite Jupiter in a square. So what I would do is emphasize the one that is closest first, but we have to include the both of them because they are in and of themselves creating an opposition. It's anything, the way I look at it is anything within 3 degrees catches my eye, and it's like a mandatory thing to identify in the chart. And hang on just a moment, because I realize that once again, I've left the full moon, or rather the moon indicators on the chart, and I want a natal chart indicator. There we go. All right, so I take that off when I do the videos because then I don't have to faff around with midheaven and ascendant. Right, so here we have, I think we broached this subject too the last time. Feels like forever ago, but that was 2 weeks ago. We talked about the Neptune ascendant using other charts as well. And so here we have the Jupiter in opposition to Venus, but it's an opposition of a little bit more than 4 degrees, which is for me interesting, but it's not compelling. And what I start to get really curious about is things that are within 3 degrees. It doesn't mean it's not important in what we're talking about now, but just in terms of the orbs. A square can go, the traditional orbs, let's say, are anything up to 8 degrees or 10 degrees, even some people give it. But I find that there won't really be such an outstanding impact in the person's life until you start getting within 3 degrees of something. So individually, we have a 3-degree orb, even if the opposition itself is actually not, right? So they're in different orbs. This one is even more interesting because then we have the south node on the midheaven as well. So we have to also factor in that this midheaven IC conjunct the nodes is also a part of the Jupiter and Venus dilemma. And when I say dilemma, I'm saying that because when a planet is squaring the nodes, it's something that we, according to evolutionary astrology, we haven't quite cottoned on to, or it's what they call a skipped step. It's something that we have to either relearn or learn in a way that is more conducive to a happier evolution or happier life this time around. And so what we're looking at here with a Venus in a square is a Venus in the 8th house ruled by the sun. We also have to include the sun in the 9th house, and we also have to include the Mercury that's ruling the sun in the 9th house. And anyway, when we look at Leo, we also want to think father. And so here we have a story, let's say, a relational story around father or father-like figures that can be even including a husband or a teacher or some kind of an influencer, meaning in the most pure sense, not in the modern sense, not in the Instagram sense, but somebody who has an influence, even could be a religious person, for example, especially with the 9th house impact, and that sun is also squaring Uranus from the 12th in Sag, so that adds to that here in this particular chart. It adds to that thing about perhaps it's got something to do with religion or the story around what we believe, what we have, whether it be political or religious faith in. So this Venus tells us something about secrets. It's the 8th house as well. It's about things that are not necessarily clear or things that are also potentially involving crises, all the 8th house things. That also, of course, includes intimacy, marriage, what comes through what we share with another person, and what comes through anything that we are grappling with that is maybe unconscious or secrets that, let's say it this way, the 8th house is secrets that we don't want to tell anybody, and the 12th house is things that are secret, but also including sometimes to ourselves. It's the unconscious. So the 8th house is things that we're not necessarily willing or able to really openly talk about. It's also where we get into that taboo stuff, but it's also where we find the the juiciness of overcoming, let's say, family patterns, family stories, family inheritance. So if you think of the eighth house as what we inherit, it's not just financial, but it's also traits that we inherit from the family patterns. Now, what does Venus rule? So we have to keep going through the whole thing, right? So what does Venus rule? Venus rules the fifth house, where we also find the North Node. So we'll keep that in mind. Venus rules the North Node, and she's squaring the North Node. She rules the fifth house, which represents children, love affairs, things that have to do with creative expression, what we feel is love, what we want, what we hope to feel is love, and especially as the North Node is there, we could say that this is part of the journey to finding security in intimacy. We have the ruler of the South Node also with Venus in the eighth, which is already pretty interesting in and of itself. It's not squaring the nodes, but it's just, again, something to take note of. And then Venus also rules the 10th house of career, vocation, social status, marital status, ambition. It's the public, it's our reputation as well. So there's something here that is playing on something that's not entirely open or exposed or desirable to be exposed, around the notion of the relational quality and the dynamic around what happens out in the field, as it were, out on the world stage, out on the social stage. And that has something to do also with the actual career and or marital status. So here again, we talk about that Mars and Venus in the eighth house. And then if we go to the other side, we have Jupiter also squaring, and Jupiter is in the second house, and that's in retrograde. So anyway, when you see a planet retrograde, you think, this planet wants to do something different. It's not going in its usual direction. It wants to do something different. It's behaving differently to other planets. Now it's up to then the astrologer to decide, well, what is this difference? Is it different in a way that is counterproductive? Is it different in a way that is like trying to run away? What's the difference here? And here we have Jupiter in the second house, where Aquarius is the sign, and that's ruled by Saturn, which is up again in the house of the social dynamic, let's say. We know that when we have a lot of Scorpio going on, Saturn and Pluto particularly with the Scorpio, there's going to be some challenge, especially when that's ruled by a Mars that is in the eighth house, where there's already, again, this kind of flavor of something challenging, something that's not easy to be open about. Now, we can also say that with this chart, this individual could be really, really good at managing other people's finances, for example. So this is where you want to keep a secret. You don't talk about these things because we're consulting, or even in the role of an astrologer, for example, we're consulting, and therefore we don't divulge secrets. So this is, again, we always want to think of the scorpionic sense of what is held back, what I hold back. But Saturn rules the house of the ascendant, so the first house where we find Capricorn, and it rules the second house, which could describe values. And when we find and also the family, and so family values as well, it's one of those things, how we handle money, how we engage in terms of what is supporting us, what supports us. And so there's something here that is not usual. And with Jupiter there, one would say, well, yeah, there's a lot of support coming from the family, but it's coming through something that's not typical. So we have a Saturn here ruled by this Mars, and it's not, generally speaking, Saturn in Scorpio is not very comfortable. It's Saturn Mars. It's difficult. There's some obstacle to overcome. And we also see that anyway, because we see also the moon and Chiron in the chart. We see that there are obstacles in this individual's experience that require extra strength and courage. So that's again coming back to the Saturn ruled by Mars. So let me pause here. Oh, and so the Jupiter in square is again something that would need to be learned. It would need, according to this principle of the squaring of the nodes, is something that has yet to be understood, or it needs to be fulfilled, let's say, to feel that one can get to that North Node place, which is in this case coming through the IC, which always represents outside of the notion of family and original like family of origin or childhood, which it also represents, is this notion of what you could call trust or security within some kind of financial dealing or within what you might describe as abundance or a lack thereof. So here again, we have this question, wait, Jupiter in the second house, that's pretty good. And then we think, well, wait, it's ruled by Saturn in a Mars ruled sign and it's retrograde. So it means that there's something kind of okay about abundance and yet kind of not. And so part of this journey is to get to that place where I feel financially secure, I feel secure in terms of myself, how I relate to myself. We come back to the Jupiter in Aquarius retrograding. It's not going to behave like the family of origin. It's not going to behave in the way that they may relate to their family. We see this also because we've got the Sun squaring Uranus, where there's a difference. There's some kind of challenge here, and that affects also let's say the father and the mother in the same kind of way. So this also could be applied to George's parents, and we say, well, they were engaging in a relationship that was out of the norm, or that felt like something had to be done that was not necessarily what they wanted to do. And there we come to the Venus opposite Jupiter and squaring the nodal axis. So before I answer the questions, I just want to see from Georgia, what, if any of that resonated, and what was this, or do you understand where that might be coming from?
I think so. I think it resonates. The Jupiter is funny. I always look at that because obviously it's supposed to signify abundance, but we were like really, really poor, really skint.
Yeah, but that's very important what you just said. That's what I'm trying to say here.
Mhm.
Jupiter should mean, hey, lots of resources, right? But it doesn't. It's ruled by Saturn and it's retrograde.
Right.
So we can't look at a planet and say, that means abundance, that means everything's cool, this is great. Even this Venus, it's like, well, wait, what's happening here? Venus is somehow kind of holding back. She's not really able to be open about what she's doing. Is that something about how we earn a living, for example? Is that something about how we relate to people intimately, etc.? So thank you for highlighting that. That's what I was trying to say about the Jupiter not giving the results that we would expect from a Jupiter in the second house.
Yeah.
Yeah, carry on.
The Venus in the 8th definitely isn't related to my career, I don't think, but I do struggle feeling sort of open with people. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But let me show you again there are a number of things that would suggest that here. For example, the North Node is on the IC, so it's all about trying to find to feel good. Sorry, I keep forgetting I have the microphone there, so pardon my thumping if that's what that sounds like. So it's trying to feel good in your own skin.
Yeah.
North Node on the IC. Okay, I'm trying to find my way of feeling okay, feeling good in my own skin. Then how does that feel? Well, then we look at the sign and then the ruler, etc. Okay, so you can already start from that premise. And understanding that there's something that feels like it's coming from a social conditioning or social pressure or the conditions that I grew up in, which were not easy. So again, I'm not dissing Scorpio. Some of you are Scorpios. Some of my best friends are Scorpios. I'm just saying that if you look at Scorpio in a chart, you want to say drama, crisis, secrets, sexuality, issues with, all kinds of things that can be challenging. Same thing if you're looking at, even, Capricorn, same deal, things that are challenging. So start from that place and you'll understand that there's a lot in the chart that is talking about the challenge and at the same time talking about how to overcome the challenge. It's built in. All right. So what would you describe this, what we call the social scene, let's say, or the influence of this Saturn midheaven, South Node, and Pluto in Scorpio for you? And that's also the house of gains, of course, right? It's a house of what we might gain from what we do.
In the present day or in my childhood?
It's all the same.
All the
It's
same.
all the
Okay.
same. So you, again, you go back to your childhood, you can go back a generation or two, because this is not just beginning on the 7th of September, 1985, you see? So this is you're continuing a pattern until you no longer continue the pattern. That's basically how it goes. We're continuing something that comes through unconsciously until somebody says, wait a minute, I don't like this. I want something different. Whatever the thing is, it doesn't matter. It'll be breaking whatever the pattern is in a way that feels more progressive or conscious or constructive. So this is also one way of looking, for example, at the planets that are squaring the nodes. Those are like the keys to understanding how to unlock this going in this direction, of feeling abundant, of feeling a sense of joy and happiness, which is 5th house. Issues around children, how to maybe create your own family in a way that feels more abundant or emotionally connected, breaking free of issues around trust, for example.
Yeah, I think that Scorpio or the 11th house, there's definite trust issues, I'd say. And yeah, probably a feeling of feeling quite sort of constrained in social interactions, maybe.
So what if you could say, like I would say, if I look at this chart, I would say, yeah, this person has some learning to do around how to socialize. So what are we looking at? It's a square to Venus.
Yeah.
And Venus is what she's hiding in the 8th house.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Somehow influenced very strongly by the father. Father is in the 9th house. It's the sun it's in its place of its glory. It's considered to be the joy of the sun, the 9th house. And it's with its ruler, Mercury, which it often is anyway, but especially here in the same sign, which is Mercury's both, it's its sign of rulership as well as its sign of exaltation. So it's a really strong Mercury. So there's an influence of the father that can also be part of why this Venus finds it really difficult.
Yeah, so my father was a Scorpio actually, and was a massive influence on me, but he was also he's quite a private person. He hid a lot of things, very secretive. Also found it really struggles with expressing emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I feel like that would explain that kind of hidden Venus thing. There's a kind of difficulty with expressing emotion in a kind of flowing way.
Mm-hmm. So I would stop me whenever you want to, but I would look at this chart and I would say that somebody in this family, potentially your father, has somehow suffered at the hands of clergy or had some kind of abuse that felt like something that could not be revealed or discussed.
That's so funny because he talks about Catholicism and how much he hates it and this so evil all the time. And it always confuses me because I'm like, well, you weren't brought up Catholic.
Mm.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when you see the ruler with the sun, so the ruler very strong here in the 9th house, strong sun, and this influence of the nodes very strong, implicating the 8th house of crisis and secrets and what is difficult to talk about, what requires a certain amount of courage, let's say, to talk about. And these are the very same planets that are ruling the nodal axis. Ruled by the sun, by that Mercury, ultimately in the 9th house. And that's in a square again. Like I said earlier, this is squaring Uranus. So there's something here to do with religion, to do with things that are conceptual or foreign, that are difficult. And both the 12th as well as the 8th imply issues around what is going on behind closed doors. Like literally what's behind the eyes, what's behind closed doors, what's far away. And we see a whole lot of indicators. Again, this thing about the Jupiter itself, which is ruling the 12th house, which is not easy, it's not in its comfort zone. So there's even a doubt around one's self-worth. How do I fit into society? You see, so all of these things together, it wouldn't be enough to say, oh, that means sexual abuse. But if I see a lot of planets or any significant planets in the 8th house, I start to look for patterns that say there's been some form of abuse here. And that individual will turn that into their way of seeing themselves as being wrong, as being inadequate, as being flawed, as being in pain. Now, Jupiter is squaring the nodal axis, and Venus is squaring the nodes on both sides. So that is both the issue and the solution to the issue, you see?
Yeah.
So, and I'm very direct in this moment, but I do take a long time to get to that kind of point when I'm with a client. But just to say, look, I mean, we've got a Chiron opposing Uranus squaring that sun. It's partile. There's something really, really, really powerful going on in terms of what is available to this person before they feel comfortable being themselves or with authority figures. They don't feel comfortable with authority figures for some reason. So the privacy factor is part of that. And again, that's on the surface, this is all like keeping the cards really close to the chest. We're going to say, you know, who do you want me to be? Fine, I'll be that person, no problem. I'll show up as you like. I'm not really sure who I need to be, so I will wait to see how you respond to me, and then I will be that person. You see? So this is already there, it's going on, and you're born into this, and you pick up that way of seeing yourself. So here the solution, let's call it shorthand solution, is to understand your value, but also coming from a place of understanding your, let's say, meaning. What is my life philosophy? What's my guiding philosophy? Especially with Aquarius, what is my ideology that drives me? And here we have this also very strong. You're automatically somebody who wants to improve, who wants to get beyond and grow. You're in a new direction. Uranus in the 12th squaring the sun would say, yeah, I need to be different. So for your dad, I hate Catholics, I hate Catholicism, whatever, I need to be different. But that doesn't have to be your story. It's just how to be different based on what you perceive as your template, as it were. And then the Chiron moon, it's part of that dynamic. It's something to do with healing this issue around the emotional sense of self, but also potentially directly with your mother. The comfort or the approachability, let's say, of your mom, who may have been a bit more intellectual, not terribly touchy-feely. And that also adds to the ability to be able to communicate. Right? So it's a Mercury, very strong Mercury ruling that moon and Chiron. So there will be a lot of communication, but is it more about the weather, or can we really talk about emotions? Right? So did that make sense in terms of the squares to the nodes? You can see how that operates through the squares to the nodes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything else before we go in a new direction or go along to another chart?
Not for me.
All right. So I would always recommend, like when I'm working with somebody individual, like when there's something that stands out like this in the chart, which is not comfortable, I would say to somebody, it can be really interesting to do family constellations therapy and try to understand what energy you're still working through and whose energy you're holding and how you might be able to move beyond that. All right, so that's just one way of going. So I saw Elsa had a hand raised, but maybe no longer. So Elsa, did you want to jump in, or is the question answered?
But I just wasn't sure if it was a useful question, but it was just because the Venus rules the North Node, so I was just wondering if that's relevant to see that, or
Yeah,
if there's any significance to the ruler of the North Node squaring the node.
Yeah,
or
that's
how
what I was
that-
saying. It is very
Yeah.
significant. Yeah, so I did say that. Venus is ruling that North Node, and the fact that it's square that's what flags your attention. It's
Okay.
even more important. Anything that rules the thing that you're trying to figure out is always going to be the clue number one, right? Rulerships are everything when you're trying to understand what's going on. So Venus is, in this case, takes priority over the Jupiter, but the Jupiter is telling us a lot. Remember that I said planets that are retrograde, they want to behave differently. What is Jupiter? It's our religion. It's what we have faith in. It's what we believe. It's what so here in the both in the social Aquarius sense and also in the family sense, and in the sense of values, we have Jupiter wanting to be different. Why? Maybe because there's been something going on here that this individual had to deal with in terms of authority figures, religious figures, structures of education. It can also be about education, like school, boarding school, you know, whatever, that kind of thing, that ninth house stuff is challenged in this sense. And it's going to want to be different. It's trying to be different because of that, not because of that, but because of the Jupiter retrograde in a Saturn-ruled sign, with Saturn itself feeling the pinch by rulership to Mars, which is the ruler of the South Node and the midheaven. See, so all of these things are adding up to a bigger story. I wouldn't just take these, let's say, things and then random planets here. Let's imagine that's Mercury and the Moon or something. I would not be so confident to say that there's been something about this person's experience with the church or with some kind of teacher or a figure along those lines.
Susan, do the decan, because Georgia and I meant to talk about our charts, and I was thinking the decans in the ninth house had something to do with it because the sun's in the second decan. So I thought it was with like higher learning. And so when we were talking, I was asking questions about that. Would you incorporate that or not really?
You can, absolutely. I mean, the decans are always interesting. You can get more detailed than that. All of these things add up. But if you see, the thing is, if you say to somebody, somebody's going to pay you $200, and you're going to say to them, yeah, so that's really cool. You have something to do with higher learning. Great, thanks for coming. And then they're going to go away and go, okay. So what we're looking for here is to resolve something or help a person see something about themselves that they can't really find, you see? So we can say on the surface, there's a million things you can say here on the surface. Like I said earlier, this could be a person who manages other people's money really well, for example. Those are the things that are on the surface of the chart, but that doesn't necessarily help the individual evolve. So what I'm trying to show you through this course is how do we find out what's going on in the individual's life that will actually help them see themselves in a different way. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
that is not wrong. It's just that my question would be, and? Do you see? So what we're looking at here goes beyond the surface idea, which you can get from any book, which is why I'm not teaching any of it. Because you pick up a book about astrology and say, oh, ninth house sun, they're really constantly studying, especially with Mercury there. They want to learn more and more. You know, all those things that you find so readily. But it's not going to be a game changer until you understand the dynamics of the rest of the chart and what it's trying to describe about that ninth house sun. Right? Equally, if we look at that apart from the nodal axis, we see that part of the journey to God is also part of the salvation of this individual's experience, right? Whether it be through Jupiter or whether it be through the sun in the ninth with Mercury, is trying to understand their way of connecting to God in a way that is different, unique, perhaps revelation, you know, something that comes through insight, for example. Because again, if we look at this chart from the more cookie cutter approach, we say, oh yeah, there's a lot here about depth of understanding. This could be a person who is absolutely an astrologer, for example. Mercury in the ninth house, Mercury very dignified in the ninth house. That's the house of astrology. The ninth house is where we do the counseling in astrology, and the eighth house is the astrology. It's the technique, it's the teacher to student learning, it's the occult aspect of it, all that stuff. So we say absolutely that. If she came and said, look, just tell me what kind of career would suit me best, then I would be talking that way. But most people don't come to me for that reason. They often don't know why they're coming to me. So my task is to show them something in the chart that seems to be the underlying little pebble in their shoe. And that's what I'm trying to expose here for you to look through the chart differently. All right. So again, it's not wrong. It's just to what degree is that really of use to the individual? Sometimes if you say something that's just really too obvious, then the person will go away. And I'm only talking in terms of course, counseling. It's not about how you understand the astrology, but the person will just go away, kind of go, that was interesting. But but then they're not likely to come back. You know, they're not likely to think that they would need a second appointment or even come back to astrology, because then they'd be wondering like, what's the value in knowing these things? So that's why my whole gig here is about trying to have people think beyond the surface the bookish definition, let's say, of all of these things, and to understand how to get into the chart so that the individual learns something about themselves. All right. So sorry?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I believe Saskia, Em, and David had questions too.
Yeah, so let's try and go with hands up for questions, and that way we can take them in as they come. So I think I've lost Saskia in the meantime. Did you want to ask a question, Saskia, or will we move on? Did it get answered?
Yes, it got answered.
Okay,
Yep.
brilliant, thanks. So Mara, did you have a question?
I wanted to say that from academic perspective in astrology, because Georgia and I share three main in this chart, and there's also many synchronicity as it goes. So I was able to enjoy the way you guided us, because to me, it was through transits. Because let's say, for example, certain things I don't have, but I noticed what you just mentioned, that it's her natal chart, it would be my transit. Because many things I still have same as her. So we
yeah.
truly had fun when we exchanged our charts, because it was so different and yet so much similarity. So
Fantastic.
not a question, but a compliment in a way.
Yeah, but
Thank
that's
you.
great. Yeah, and thanks for doing those exchanges, because that really, we learn a lot from doing them. So I do hope you continue with that. If you haven't done that already, maybe think of doing that this week, where you can share a chart with somebody, share your chart with somebody. So David,
Yes, good morning.
good morning.
Amazing insight, Susan. Really opens a big door here, the way that you're looking at astrology.
Good.
Yeah, I've done a few exchanges and one with Georgia. Would that Neptune trine to the Mercury, did that give her the insight to see beyond religion?
It can do. I would say that that would be a result, but what it is initially can also be a difficulty with the truth.
Okay.
Difficulty either understanding what is true, you know, in a perfectly like a childlike, innocent way, like what's going on, and also difficulty in grappling with the truth, right? Because we're looking at a Saturn ruled by that Mars in the 8th. They are, it's a big orb, but they are squaring as well.
Yes.
Right? So that's almost 23 degrees there. That's about a 5.5-degree square, which is definitely to be considered. So there's so much tension in that. So you want to feel what is the condition of that Saturn, and what is the ruler then of the ascendant, and that Neptune on the ascendant. So Bea, I think, was asking the question about the outer planets now, Pluto and Neptune and Uranus, and those we're definitely now, I think, able to add them in, where even Chiron and whatever other thing you might want to use, an asteroid or whatever, those you can start to add in now, and they'll give you these extra details. I wanted to make sure that we all got the basics first, that we all were really clear before entering into this. But then when we start to look at these outer planets, the first thing to think of is that they become problematic. They're initially problematic. And that is not always the new agey way of looking at them, but they all cause trouble. Neptune is about disappointment, disillusionment. It's about not seeing clearly. It's about things that are a little bit on the margins. It's not really easy to grasp.
Yes.
Uranus is disruptive. It throws everything into question. It just challenges our way of seeing reality. It challenges, in this case, our way of understanding religion, or who has power, who has, and this can also be with the 9th house, 11th house, especially with the Jupiter that's not terribly comfortable. Not that Jupiter is bad in Aquarius, not at all. It's just that there's something about this Jupiter and the rulership here, the Jupiter ruling that Sagittarius. There's something about perhaps also the judiciary, or what is fair, even on a day-to-day level. What is fair? That's not fair. This is not, life is not fair. And so I don't know, Georgia, if your father has that kind of feeling, or if there's a feeling in the family that life sucks, it's not fair.
Life's not fair was my mum's motto when we were growing up.
Right, well, there we have to add her in, because there's the moon in opposition to all of that, you see?
Yes.
And that ties us right back into what we would have hoped for, what we want to see, but you know, not so great. So again, that's the salvation comes after the realization, or after being so fed up with the difficulty, after being so challenged that you have no choice but to find a solution on your own that's not given to you, let's say.
Yes.
Because here we've got that square, there's something she has to do differently. And that Neptune then becomes the, oh, I see, now I have a new way of visioning this, a new way of identifying with this. Then the Pluto, which initially feels like I don't really fit in here, I don't really get the crowd, I don't really feel like I'm part of this kind of social group, or it feels difficult. I really want in, but I don't feel like I belong. That's also part of the Saturn there, but that then becomes what we actually overcome, where we actually get the strength to move through it and say, wait, I do have something to say, I do have this capacity, and then we do it differently. Pluto is about transformation and doing something differently. How? Well, we find the result coming through that Mars, which is finding its solution from the Sun in the 9th, and then ultimately the dispositor is Mercury, saying, think bigger. Think about the big picture, think optimistically, think from a scope of idealism, think, etc., etc. You see?
Yeah,
Which ties us
absolutely.
back through the trine to the Neptune. So the solution only usually comes through the difficulties. And so it's important for me to emphasize again that if it seems really negative, the way that I look at a chart, because it can be quite shocking, especially if you're used to, you know, the kind of, hey, everything's cool and the universe is all about love and light, then this feels really heavy. But I honestly, I mean, you just walk down a street and you'll find 9 out of 10 people are living a pretty heavy existence. That's the reality of it. It's not that we're trying to emphasize that. It's we're going to say, hey, life is shitty. How can you make your life better? How do we move forward into a better way of seeing that? And so for many people, you get to help them find the solution in the very problem that they are experiencing. You see? So yeah, you can get people who are coming with something that's quite challenging, and you, as an astrologer, for those of you who want to continue and be in the profession of astrology, or even if you're doing it for people that you know, you want to be equipped to understand how dark things can get with people. You know, I've had people who are survivors of satanic ritual abuse in my clientele, and it gets pretty dark. And then you're really looking in the chart and going, okay, this is what we're working with. This is what we got. This is where you can go with that. So you want to also get comfortable with all of that whole spectrum of what life can bring somebody, and not always try and give that mamby-pamby, this is going to be great. Look at you with your sun in the 9th house. Isn't that awesome? That's the joy of the sun. You know, it's all going to be great. So then the person's going to be like, what's wrong with me, man? My life's supposed to be great. That astrologer said my life was supposed to be great. I was supposed to be rich.
Unicorns. Unicorns.
Yeah, unicorns. I was supposed to be rich. I don't have money. And, you know, all these things. So when you really understand, and it starts with the rulerships, and it starts with the understanding of what all of these relational qualities are between the planets and the different respective rulers and the houses. Which houses are the problems? Well, we're nailing them. We got the 6th house. So the 4th is challenging in the sense of childhood, right? And then we've got something here which has another reference to childhood, psychological stuff. And then we have another reference in the 6th house. Then we have the 8th, then we have the 12th. We know that we're not dealing with something that's light and fluffy. And anyway, if you open up a chart and it's got an ascendant in Capricorn or an ascendant in Scorpio, you start from the premise that they're going through a difficult life. That's just the way it goes. And I apologize in advance for anyone who doesn't want to hear that. If you've got a Scorpio rising or a Capricorn ascendant, you signed up for something that was big and challenging. So that's the way that goes. And if you have that and you don't agree, I'd love to see your chart. Let's have a look. Because I've never seen anything different. And often when I say that to somebody, it's like, okay, I take away anything else here. I haven't seen any of that. And I say, oh, ascendant in Capricorn. Wow, okay. So you have this life that is somehow founded on a feeling of being responsible for everything that's going on around you, but not knowing why. You feel guilty, but you don't know why. And all of that is coming from then the rest of what we see here, especially starting with the Saturn, right? So this is why I do what I do. I'm not a pessimist at all by nature. I'm an optimist, which is what allows me to do these kinds of things, because I know that people can overcome, right? One of the reasons I started to be more interested in my own journey as an astrologer, especially for myself initially, was because I had such bad readings from people that did not help me understand what was actually going on in my life. They didn't help me understand why I was having so many difficulties, from nearly dying, losing a child, losing all my money, all these things. And they're like, oh my God, it's so fantastical. You're so spiritual. It's like, I know, but what's going on in my day-to-day? It's like, please help me with this. So if you want to go towards helping people, try, really try to hold that space. For life is difficult and we're equipped to deal with it, right? So go to that place where you could say, yeah, wow, okay, that's difficult. And find tools, like meaning not therapeutic necessarily, unless you're already wanting to go in that direction, but counseling tools that allow you to speak to somebody in the difficult places. Because otherwise it will be difficult and even perhaps challenging for the person that you're talking to.
Thank you, Susan. That's really helpful.
Okay, thanks. And so have we bruised Georgia enough now? Have we done enough? Georgia, have we done enough?
We've done enough, yes.
Have we spoiled your Sunday now?
Yeah, I quite appreciate hearing that my life is challenging. It feels quite challenging. So it's nice to hear someone
Yeah, well, this is the thing, and it's not me saying it, it's your
Yeah.
chart. That's the
Yeah.
thing. This is why I always say to people, this is the chart telling me what I'm saying to you. I'm not making shit up. This is me understanding what's in your chart. And some people say, thank God,
Yeah.
because, I thought I was supposed to be rich, or I thought I was supposed to be like this brilliant scholar or whatever. And no, it's good. There's a difference.
I thought Georgia would be the next Susan. That's what I told her. I said, I feel like you're going to be the next Susan and you're going to have a channel and I'm going to subscribe to you.
Well, I mean, absolutely. I'm not suggesting at all like me. It's in her way. She has to do her way.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, it can absolutely have to do with the occult. We have a midheaven ruled by Scorpio. So also, whenever you see a midheaven ruled by Scorpio, you say, oh, that's interesting. This person is motivated and even to the point of wanting to do this out in the world, in society, by things that are secretive, by things that are occult, by things that are a little bit difficult, like kind of slightly edgy things in life, all that stuff, conspiracies, all that stuff. And especially as the South Node is there as well, there's a kind of there's a sense of, this is part of what I already know, right? What I'm already handling in life. There we are. All right. So was there another question? Did something come up here?
Just a comment about book. Julie got The Astrologer, The Counselor, The Priest by Juliet Sharman Burke and Liz Green.
Oh, I've never read that book, but I heard, Liz Green is quite extraordinary. She's responsible for a lot of what is on astro.com. Quite an extraordinary psychological astrologer. So yeah, if you recommend that book, I think I can support that recommendation just based on her authorship. Yeah, very good. Is there something specific to this chart that she points out in that book? Did you want to mention that, or was it just for the book in general?
No, I just got it. I've just started it, but it's 2 seminars on astrological counseling. So
Ah, very good. Okay.
I thought
Yeah,
that.
excellent. Yeah, very good. And the one thing I would say is that on top of that, because she's excellent, is that she's British, very British, and there's a certain era. So this is maybe from 20, 30 years ago. And we always want to keep in mind, who am I dealing with? I'm dealing, in this case, let's say a woman from the UK, that might suit that person better. But if I'm dealing with somebody from Africa or the United States or from India or wherever else, Hong Kong or whatever, you'll want to at least have an idea of what their cultural norms are, because what that would represent for them would be different, you know. So what cultural, if I have some clients that are from Afghanistan and Iran, for example, when we talk about sexual taboos, it's really, we have to go really slow. It's really different, and it's not that they're not happening, it's just that we have to find the way in a way that feels safe and comfortable. And they want to do it, but they wouldn't broach the subject themselves, for example. Whereas if I have an American, on the contrary, within 5 minutes, they're like, yeah, my dad abused me, my brother too. And it's a completely different ballgame, because Americans often tend to be a little towards a little oversharing, and often it comes out really early in the session. And then the Brits might be exactly the opposite, just for example. So that's helpful to notice. So who's writing the book? What cultures am I dealing with mostly? What religion am I dealing with mostly, for example? Right, I want to look at a chart that I am going to, oh, I have to do it here. This is a chart that I'm going to put up anonymously because I don't want to influence you. And if you recognize the chart, you star astrologers out there, if you recognize the chart, just kind of hold that back for now. Hang on, sample, sample, sample. There we go, sample. There we go. All right, so here we have a chart. Now I want to,
Sorry, I just have a question.
yes, sure.
Will you tell us whose chart it is at the end? Or...
Yeah, but only at the end, yeah. Because I want you to get the astrology first without being influenced by the life of the person, okay? Because it's a really famous person. So it's a woman, so I put that up there because it's also helpful to know, is this a male or a female? Because you'll look at that chart differently accordingly. And by the way, that still applies even if the person has had sex change operations. So I've had clients also who are trans, and their chart reads as a man. And then you think, wait, this is a woman, but it doesn't read right. And then when you find out, no, they are actually trans, then so you can still trust your instincts. We'll speak a lot with Roisin about that, trusting the instincts. So here we have, again, a lot of Scorpio. So that Scorpio energy, just throw out a bunch of words or write them in the chat about all of those aspects of Scorpio that should catch our attention. In terms of let's say, what's challenging to this person. So we find, first of all, we have an ascendant in Gemini, and just I'll point out the blindingly obvious, the ascendant is in the 6th house. So really important, the ascendant ruler rather, really important. And that partly answered the question about that Venus in square to the nodes earlier that Elsa was asking. And so we have that on the south node. So let's just start with all the Scorpio, and then we'll get to that. So just throw out a bunch of words. What is the thing about
Father wounded the person.
Just let's go with Scorpio. Just for the moment, just what the deal is with Scorpio that we want to kind of keep in mind when we're looking at the chart. What's the scorpionic stuff?
The work is sort of psychological and
Yeah, whoa. Just Scorpio. We're abstracted. We're going back to cookie cutter astrology. We're just looking at Scorpio. What are all the challenges that are associated with Scorpio, or all the things that we should think about when we're looking at Scorpio? And then we'll go to the houses and all that other stuff.
So there's
difficulty communicating.
I've got secretive medicine, loss, not so sure about the loss part. Maybe you can explain that. Sex, for sure, driven. Crisis, transformation. Grudge, revenge. Paranoia. Money. Taboo. intense person. Yeah, so we can say that intensity, intense emotion, sexual healer. No, we're not pulling in the sixth house yet, so let's leave that for a second. Just Scorpio, mistrusting, yeah, unconscious impulses, digs deep, needs to be in power, difficult communication. Anything else about Scorpio? Cutting, severing, deeply emotional. So we've got all those different things to keep in mind. Loyal, for sure. Loyal. Right, okay, so I think I've got them all. One new, what's coming up? Truth seeking, for sure. If we're seeking the truth, why are we seeking the truth?
Because we think people are lying to us.
Right. We're seeking the thing that we don't think is there, right? So if it's not there, we're looking for it. So if Scorpio is a truth seeker, it's because they don't really swim in the waters of truth. To see how that works? So this is the thing to know. There's a reason behind all these things. Insight for sure, doesn't quit for sure. Mars rules, is willing to fight. Yeah. Detective for sure. Yeah, very good. Excellent. All right, so you get the picture. This is the energy of Scorpio that is there in now the sixth house. So we add to all of those aspects. Now just throw out a bunch of ideas around the sixth house, whether it's in the chat or open mic, whatever you like. Again, keeping in mind that the ruler of the ascendant is there. So sixth house stuff. Duty, daily routines, obligations, duty, serving others, health, challenges, hard work, hardworking around communication, pets, they love this, pets, schedule, work, intellectual, enemies, pets. Somebody's really into the pets, sex, trauma, healing, all together. Keep going. Sixth house. We could say sixth house overall, one word, if you just want that one word. Yeah, obsessive, responsible, very good. Responsibility, it's obstacles. So if you think obstacles in just the most general way, what's an obstacle? Well, taxes. What's an obstacle? Well, work. What's an obstacle? Well, I'm ill. What's an obstacle? Well, I've got this thing I have to do all the time. So obstacles. And then you try and look into the nature of the obstacles. And yes, sixth house is digestive system, but we're looking at this in the generalized sense of what could this be with reference to the individual. So yeah, if you're having a private consultation, you might look at that and say perhaps there's some issues there. Employees, perfectionist, service, sacrifice, service, sickness, service oriented, excellent. All right, now we've got the ruler of the ascendant in the sixth house. Now give me some idea. Here, ruler of the ascendant is Mercury in Scorpio. So tell me some words that would associate those things now to describe this ascendant. Poor health. Mary, I think you mean private. Yeah, there we go. Keep themselves private. Obstacles with siblings. Self-sacrificing. Mental issue.
I'm not exactly sure how to put it in writing, but with
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Gemini, that's obviously a very sort of I guess talkative sign, but with Mercury and Scorpio, is there maybe a like trouble linking thoughts and words? And
Very, very true. They define themselves by their work. For Mary, works in the field of communication, communicates loudly. Their difficulties can be as well. But what you're saying, absolutely, Elsa, is this that for sure is true.
I mean,
Psychic,
my Mercury is in Scorpio, and that's something I struggle with,
Right.
sort of putting
So
thoughts into words.
yeah, that's very interesting that you say that, and you can maybe give us some more ideas as we go to understand that better. Psychic, maybe that's open to interpretation because we're looking at a number of different factors for somebody to be psychic. So it's not that Mercury's in Scorpio, that means the person is psychic, okay? Maybe, it's not a no, just a maybe. Right, and now, who's ruling all this stuff? So we got the ruler of the ascendant in the 6th house, Scorpio. Who's ruling Scorpio? Who's ruling the ruler of the ascendant? Mars, Mars, Mars. There we go, so Mars. Look at that. Mars is with Pluto, and it's on the icy, and it's with Saturn. And what's Saturn doing?
Retrograde?
No.
It's
In
in
this,
detriment.
in this software, the retrogrades are red. So we see Uranus, for example, in red. So retrogrades show up as red. Other softwares put a little R next to
Right.
degrees.
It's in detriment in Leo.
It's heavily in detriment, and
Squaring the nodes.
Squaring the
And-
node.
and
Squaring Mercury and the node.
right. And what
nodes.
is Mercury?
Retrograde.
And what is Mercury?
The chart ruler.
The chart ruler. Well, we have to say ascendant ruler technically.
And the
so
ruler, sorry.
we try, and we all make the mistake, but it's just, as a teacher, I feel it incumbent on me to tell you it. We should be saying ascendant ruler. So here we have Saturn, not in good dignity, and in the house of communication, and it's squaring the planet of communication, which itself is retrograde on the south node and ruled by a very tetchy Mars, Pluto, right? So here, because if we, again, for those of you who like the modern astrology, we can even say, Pluto is a co-ruler with Mars. I still will stick to the Mars, but definitely because Pluto is playing a huge role here, we have something to look at. So let's have a look at let's only do Mars in the 3rd house, then we'll look at Mars Leo. Okay, what is Mars in the 3rd house?
Feisty communicator.
Feisty is a good word, yeah.
Problems with siblings.
Problems with siblings. So here also, somebody said not able to speak, obstacles with community or uncles. Mother superior, I'm not sure where that comes from. Maybe we're going back. Squaring Mercury, constricting, inhibiting communication, yeah, restricting, struggles with siblings. Okay, so let's keep going. So this person is controversial around communication. Excellent way of describing that.
Mhm.
So Mars, again, Mars 3rd house, anything else?
Combative with siblings,
And
communication.
yeah,
Yeah.
combative is a great word,
Especially
right?
with conjunct with Pluto there.
Especially, and that would be what?
A family dynamic.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely. So
Very, very defensive. Also,
defensive.
maybe, I think with the Leo Saturn combination.
Absolutely. And what does Leo represent? So for a moment, we're just going to leave the sun out of the picture, but Leo in general, what does Leo represent?
The ego.
Pride.
Sorry,
Pride.
pride.
Um,
I heard something else,
Ego.
but they got
Ego.
blended. Ego, pride,
creativity.
creativity. And David, I heard something, but I didn't hear what.
I said pride.
Oh, you did, okay.
Self-importance.
Self-importance,
Child
spotlight,
energy. Right.
limelight, spotlight. Leo can be childlike as well. But Leo has this quality. What is that quality that is
Leadership.
the leadership?
Mhm.
So how would this person engage in some kind of leadership quality?
Power
In a
dynamic.
disruptive manner. Communicating in a controversial.
Controversial, potentially destructive. Somebody's written deceptive. Well done. This is now we're getting there. Do you get it? Now we're getting there. This is a no holds barred kind of dynamic, isn't it? Now that is ruling, Mars is ruling that sun, and the sun is ruling that Mars. So remember what we talked about when these planets are in their own places. in each other's places rather. This is not a direct square, so it's a little bit, it's a bit too wide a margin traditionally for a square, but it's squaring by sign. So this would be a mutual generosity of some kind that's still really significant. But all of that is also showing up in a square to this planet,
Venus.
to Venus, right? So all that we've seen here, the ruler, the ascendant, all of this that is challenging in terms of communication, connection, in terms of the everyday, is also showing up through a square that Venus is squaring the IC, and so she's squaring the MC-IC axis, squaring Pluto and Mars, and also on the other side, squaring Saturn. And that's a Venus there in a masculine sign. So again, now we have an actual mutual reception between Venus and Mars. Oh, no, we don't. No, sorry, I'm getting it wrong because it's not the sun. Now we have Venus in a square to Pluto, Mars, as well as the IC and Saturn, squaring to all of that stuff, which also represents what? What is the Leo symbol? The notion of what Leo represents.
Lion.
The lion and?
The sun. Well,
Yes,
no,
yes, yes. That's the ruler of Leo.
king,
The king. The
Yeah.
king. So we could say the most important person, the leader, the ruler, the man also. So it is usually with reference to males, right? Leo is a masculine sign. It's ruled by the sun. It's masculine. So men, we can, as a shorthand. That's one way of saying this, this notion. Keep in mind, this is a female. This is a female chart. Now, Venus herself is in this masculine sign. So we know that Venus is in her what?
detriment.
In detriment, because normally she would be ruling Taurus, right? So she is ruling from she's in a rulership of a north node in Taurus from a place of detriment, from a place where there's some kind of struggle, what we could even describe as anger, fury, feeling a chip on her shoulder, feeling inadequate about self, about identity, for example. Now, this Saturn is, as we saw, it's squaring the chart ruler, which is huge, and it's squaring the nodal axis. Who wants to have a stab at what this will require or what this could represent? We could start, if you want, you could start with the Mercury on the south node, and we can go then to the square, or you can start with the square and go in the Mercury south node direction.
Mercury South Node Scorpio, maybe letting go of the secrets, not willing to keep them anymore.
Maybe I would say that would be the evolved version.
Gossip.
So remember, gossip is a good one. Remember that where we begin from is usually the problematic point, right? We don't usually begin with the easiest bits, and then by the time we're 80, we get to the problems. It tends to be the other way around. So this is baked into her natal chart. So Mercury on the south node in Scorpio, ruling the chart. Sorry, ruling the ascendant. Squared by.
Yeah, I would say very talking out of turn, perhaps letting secrets out, telling other people's secrets.
Can be, for sure, for sure. And also the fact that secrets play a role is kind of there, isn't it? It's there. And it's a Mercury that's retrograde. So again, we're seeing that Mercury is doing things differently here, doing things a little not the ordinary Mercury, right? And what is the nature of Mars in the third house? And you mentioned, a few of you mentioned some of these things in terms of communicating with people.
Combative communication.
Combative, right. It's sarcastic, right? It's harsh. It's not easy. It's not sort of like, let's get along kind of energy, is it? This is not, doesn't come naturally to this individual.
Be very sharp-tongued. Like-
Sharp-tongued, yeah.
Cutting, like, ouch.
Yeah, somebody in the comments also mentioned defensive. I have to come back to the chat because there was some really good things there. Femininity conflicts with her career, for sure.
But she's exposing maybe some things about women, women's rights, or something like that.
Could be, yeah, withholding,
And is
abuse.
being ridiculed by it with the Saturn in the 4th house.
Yeah, you're reading that in the 4th. You could do that. That I would say Saturn in the 4th would be much more about her emotional connection, her ability
Excuse me,
to
I meant, I
relate.
guess more that the fact that she's saying it, she's being ridiculed.
That certainly is not comfortable, is it, if she's speaking out? It's in a square to Mercury, and the Mercury is retrograde, so it's certainly not comfortable for this individual. Hot, fiery, abrasive, rough emotions against men. This is what I was getting at. Against men. You see, this is a woman that has a difficult time being a woman. Her challenge, kind of baked in to her life, is that it's difficult being a woman in her life. Right? So we see now Mercury on the South Node. Mercury on the South Node is challenges with communication, as many of you have already said, and we see that in its extreme because of that Saturn. And this can also be, especially because it's in 6th house, which is about challenges and obstacles and difficulties to overcome. It's about business associates. It's about contracts, employees, relationships with colleagues, and this kind of thing. It also is where we see the scorpionic influence of Mercury on the South Node is not really easy. So it's going to take on that scorpionic flavor of secrets and backroom dealings, things that are not super comfortable. They might require force. They might require more masculine energy, as we see also with that Venus. But on the other side of the Mercury, we also have Jupiter, which we can also consider to be conjunct the South Node. And here we see a Jupiter in strong dignity. It's not only in the 7th, but it's in its own sign. So it's angular and it's in its own sign. So Jupiter on the South Node in Indian astrology is considered a warning to women to be careful of issues, of karmic issues with your spouse, issues of difficulties with the spouse. Well, what is her spouse like? If you've got Jupiter in an angular house, ruling the 10th house and in strong, in its own sign, what is the spouse like for this person?
Dominant.
Yeah,
Has
maybe.
affairs.
Sorry?
Has affairs.
Can have affairs, yeah. But it's not just that, it's that there's a stature. What is the status of this individual?
Oh, a public person.
It would be somebody
Protocol?
of
Yeah.
good stature, right? An important person. It's a Jupiter already in its own sign, Sagittarius. That's a person of status. It's ruling the 10th as well. So it's a famous person. It's a person people recognize, right? It would be, even if it's in your own community, let's say you're not a famous person, but your spouse is known. Your spouse might be like the local doctor or the local lawyer or whatever, you see? So that's a Jupiter, meaning spouse for her. That is a prominent person, could describe it that way, prominent person. So we have that on the South Node, and we see that they're also with the Jupiter from her nature, especially with the Mercury there can be some challenges with people in positions of prominence, not just the spouse, that's the one thing, but challenges in general with those people, or there's a strong influence on their life that is quite karmic. It's also connected to the nodes. So these are karmic things when they're conjunct, not so much the squares. The conjunction especially is very karmic. So what would that be like? What does Jupiter also represent?
Teachers.
Sorry, say that again, Georgia.
Teachers.
Teachers, yeah.
Our beliefs? What are
Yeah, beliefs.
Expansion.
Sorry?
Expansion.
Expansion, yeah. Figures. What kind of figures does Jupiter represent in terms of, or you know, the qualities, let's say, of Jupiter?
Influential.
Influential,
Religious?
religious.
Teachers, gurus. Father can be the father.
Not necessarily. No, we're looking more
in this
towards the
case?
sun, Saturn for the father. So Sagittarius is also foreign things, right? Foreigners, foreign things.
Like a dignitary or
Dignitary, could be a
Yeah.
judge, for example, judge, lawyer.
Yeah.
All right, so you're getting my drift here with this. So
Spouse from another country.
it can be, yeah. That's one way, or at the very least, what we could also say is another religion, for example, or another way of being, another life quality.
Could that also be like a clergy person? 'Cause it's-
Yeah, could be. And this is also South Node stuff, which means that this is something that is an influence that is also to be overcome or to be dealt with in this. There's a karmic thing. So we would see that more clearly if we put the spouse's chart with this person's chart. But this is anyway what this person has to understand in this lifetime, that these things, dealing with these figures, the Jupiterian qualities. And Jupiter also is about what is right? Jupiter is about morality, about what is right. And it's with a slightly troublesome ruler of the ascendant on the South Node. And with all of this Mars-led influence, Mars being very influential in that 6th house, really, really difficult stuff, right? It's not super noble, we could say. Samantha, did you want to add something?
I wanted to ask, because in the beginning of the session, you said that the orb is 3 to 4 degrees. So I got a bit confused because Jupiter is 7 degrees. And why would this one for you?
It's a conjunction. So I was talking about an orb of square earlier. I was talking about an orb of a square. And when you're talking about a conjunction, you want to go much wider, 10, you can even go 12 or 15 degrees, especially for the nodes. The nodal orb can be up to 18 degrees. I don't usually give it 18 degrees. I usually stop at 15. But 18 degrees is where we start to enter into the 18 degrees from the south node is where we start to enter into the eclipse point. So let's say the sun or moon are 18 degrees from the nodal axis, then we're into a partial eclipse.
And
But
for an opposition, what orb would you use?
Opposition it's similar to a conjunction, so that would be 10 degrees or 5 on either side, for example. The rule is that the tighter, the more influential. So obviously if something is, like in this case, the ascendant ruler, and it's just 2 degrees away, just a little more than, no, what is it? Yeah, 2 and a bit degrees away from the conjunction, that takes precedence over this Jupiter. I'm just adding the Jupiter for part of understanding the quality of her south node impact as well, and how that also influences this whole story of the dynamic around men in her life, right? Because this is part of her dynamic, her struggle.
Thank you.
So always look at the tightness of an orb. Yeah, Jupiter righteousness, that's a good word for Jupiter, especially in Sagittarius. So that tightness of the orb is really what makes you look at it and say, oh, yes, for sure, that's really something that stands out. Now we have another tight orb here, which is a trine from Neptune to the ascendant. So when Neptune is trining the ascendant, in general, we can say not quite the same as when Neptune is on the ascendant or squaring the ascendant, but there's something that is a little bit not clear about the individual. So whenever Neptune and the ascendant are in contact in some way or another, there's something that's not entirely clear. That's all. And then how does that take shape? Well, we have to look for the ruler, and there we go back to the Venus, and we have the same story again, right? So something's not clear, something's not entirely open or not entirely accessible, let's say. Hard to grasp is one way of saying Neptune trining the ascendant. It's hard to grasp. Neptune is also in a trine to the midheaven. So that creates, again, it's an orb of 4+ degrees, but it's still a trine. I give up to 7 degrees. That's the traditional orb. Even 8 degrees, some people say, but I prefer 7. So here we have a really tight trine between the ascendant and Neptune, and then we have a slightly weaker trine, but still important, 4 degrees from Neptune to the midheaven. And the midheaven itself is ruled by
Saturn.
the Saturn, which is not in a good dignity, right?
And that Saturn's also ruling the 8th. So is that something about she's hiding something?
Well, yeah, very good.
Intentional.
Exactly this. So that's exactly where you want to understand. This is where this starts to go, you see? We have a house of challenge and difficulty, the energy of secrecy, the energy of things that are a little bit heavy to deal with. It's a lot of personal willpower. This is the 3rd house. Lots of force, lots of willpower, lots of dynamic of having to struggle for a lot of reasons. And then we get to the rulerships, and then we say, oh, well, so we've got Saturn ruling the 8th. We also have Mars ruling the 11th, which is, again, what is that? It's society, right? It's social, it's the stage, it's the public, what do you call it? Yeah, public relations, the networks, and so on. Alrighty. So behind all of this, we have this extremely tender moon. David, did you want to ask a question? Sorry, I just saw that.
Yeah, just that Neptune with the midheaven. I guess there's some projection on her also. She's being projected on by the public.
Absolutely. So that's just like the conjunction. It works both ways. There can be a way of being not so clear. Neptune in the 5th in general can be a really good actor. It's a great thing to have as an actor. The 5th house is about embodying how you express yourself. Dancers, for example, you see a lot of 5th house activity for dancers, embodying how you express yourself. And so that works both ways, would be projected upon as well as, but we have to always consider what is going on in terms of the energy of that. So here we have that Venus that's not in strong dignity. So as a woman, having to constantly go back to this dynamic of the Mars and Sun is part of how she would be perceived as well as how she engages. So both together. All right. So let's come back to, oh yeah, the moon. The moon is ruled by this Jupiter. So again, very strong, but Jupiter in the 7th house has the quality, and you can read that in the 6th as well, depending on what kind of chart you're using, but we're working with the whole sign for now. So Jupiter in the 7th has the quality of trying to please others, right? It's like it's got this dynamic of trying to keep other people happy. So that's part of her balancing act of going through all of this pressure, the struggle, the challenge, and the projection, as David points out. It's a really good point. And then we've got this moon in Pisces, which can be extremely vulnerable, very emotionally vulnerable, very, yeah, again, maybe always we think in terms of the axis of Virgo and Pisces. There's something there to do with martyring and being a martyr or being martyred or being in that dynamic of victim savior. And that's in the 10th house. A moon in the 10th house, think of the moon, wherever the moon is, it waxes and wanes, right? That's the quality of the moon. It's a waxing and waning quality. So it means changeability right there. And its changeability is due to what? It's due to the faith, due to the partner, life partner, or spouse, or whatever you want to, husband, due to other people and the demands of other people and how this person might want to show up for those demands. And when we have the moon in the 10th house, that reflects how the person is sometimes popular, sometimes not, in terms of career, in terms of the reputation, in terms of how they show up in the world. Now, her career can also be seen by the midheaven, and we see that in the 9th house. So her career is also with the Aquarius energy. It makes it even stronger. There's an ideological quality to the career. And there's a strong will and purpose. So these are the political houses, the 9th and the 11th, very political. 10th houses, then the rulership or the leadership or the quality of being known for something. But this is a little bit wobbly when we have a moon involved there. So that means that the people or the reputation or the desire is waxing and waning. And we see that also in terms of the moon in a square to Uranus. There's an unpredictability that this individual shows up in terms of how they show up out in the world. That can also be either a reference to the needs of other people, the partners, business partners, spouse, etc., or with reference to the individual themselves and the way that they feel. Right? And again, we have to keep all the rest of the stuff in consideration. The other thing, as I mentioned earlier, is when you have a lot of Scorpio, and especially whenever you have a stellium, it's just one thing to note. She's got 2. This one is the stronger of them because the personal planets are there. A person's life is impacted in intense ways. It's not just like things are changing as the person goes through life. It's like da 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 da, things are changing, and this is that, and this is that, and it's all at once. It's super intensive. And this is not just because it's Scorpio, but because it's a stellium. So there's an intensity around all the things that come up. And what is again the flavor of the 6th house?
Service.
Say it again.
Service.
Obstacle.
To serve or service.
Service, obstacles. It's everything shitty, right? It's the 6th house is all the stuff we don't want to do. It's like what I have to do the dishes, don't want to do. I have to pick up the kids, don't want to do that. Have to get up at 6 in the morning, don't want to do that. It's all that 6th house stuff. It's crisis. It's challenge on top of the fact that it's Scorpio, you see? This person is putting out fires practically from the moment they get out of bed, right? This is the nature of this individual's life, just crisis after crisis after crisis. So Elsa, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering about the moon in the 10th house and in Pisces. Would that also be reason for people to, I mean, for when she spoke out about things, would that also sort of add to why people would dislike her? Because I don't know how to word it.
It's not because it's the moon in Pisces necessarily. It's the moon in the 10th house. So
Yeah.
it'll take on the flavor. But what that really means is that there's no stability. Like if you've got Saturn in the 10th house, you're in for the long haul. You're just going to keep slogging. You're just going to keep moving forward. And it's not to say that this person wouldn't also. Certainly part of her big lesson. But also it's the fact that it's the moon. And so there's waxing and waning reputation, waxing and waning popularity, waxing and waning interest in career, waxing and waning in all of those dynamics that have to do with the moon.
But so she wasn't taken very seriously, I guess. Or
not necessarily. No, it's more about the relatability. The moon is about how we connect emotionally, right? So the relatability. And that goes both ways. It goes from her as well as to her, right? So there was a question here about the midheaven. Now I just want to come back to that. When the midheaven is not in the 10th, is there a desire to do something in the world that isn't really possible for the person? No. The midheaven is just the midheaven. It's where do I express my vocation, my career, my social status? What is the extra quality? So 10th house is always the 10th house. It's always going to give us the quality of that reputation and my ambition, my overall drive for what I do when I step out the front door, my social status, all that stuff. But the midheaven is how do I do that? Where do I do that? And the focal point here would be the 9th house for her. So 9th house is judiciary, right? It's government. It can be God as well, except that here we see that there would be an issue with all of that stuff. There's also potentially an issue around the judiciary and all of these other things as well. The 9th house also relates to, like I said earlier, politicians as well. It's also the house of the father. So there is definitely an issue here with the father that's there in the individual's life. Miriam, you have a question.
Yes, Susan, I just was wondering, you said that the third house stellium would reflect defensiveness. And I just wanted to ask, is there a specific combination of planetary impacts there that makes you think of defensiveness exactly?
Oh, well, it
Other
would
than
be
the Mars.
the Mars-Pluto.
Yeah,
And
is it Mars-Pluto? That was it. I just didn't get that. Okay.
yeah, and the fact that Saturn is in its detriment. So it's suggesting that there's a lack of esteem, there's a lack of confidence in oneself that actually can produce an arrogance. That's the thing about Saturn in Aries or Saturn in Leo. There's a defensive arrogance. So because there's a lack of confidence, then they end up over exaggerating the self in this case. But it's coming from that emptiness. The other thing about all of this, like especially the Mars-Pluto, is being absolutely unquestioningly right. I am right. Do not question me. Do not contradict me. I am right. And that's especially true because we see this challenge with the Mercury. We see the challenge with the Venus in square to that. And communication with this individual is the big struggle. It's the big challenge that both people have with the individual as well as the individual would have in terms of overall connection with people. All right. So are we ready to find out who this person is? Does anybody want to say anything more about the chart? I just checked the chat.
James says it's him.
Saskia says it's me. What's you?
Oh, Saskia, sorry.
Well,
Hillary Clinton.
I have a stellium I'm Gemini rising, stellium of Scorpio in the 6th, my North Node in the 3rd house, and 28 degrees Pisces moon.
That's interesting. So how do you experience that?
Well, I don't have the conflict really with the speaking or with authority so much.
Where's your Mercury?
My Mercury's in Scorpio in the
It's also in Scorpio, but not with the South Node.
Yeah, but my North Node is in Leo. Yeah. But
that's a different dynamic, isn't it? So
yeah.
we're especially like if we took away all the other stuff, this is still problematic for communication. You see the South Node Mercury thing, especially that it's a Mercury in a Mars ruled sign and that it's also in the 6th house and that it's a Mercury retrograding. You see, so we see subtracting everything else, we say, this person, although they want to show up as friendly, they want to show up as social, they want to show up as likable, but nobody likes them. Well, and that's of course an exact meaning. It's difficult for people to trust them. That's maybe what that is. It's more, I can't trust this person. They show up like this, not entirely sure that I can be sure who this person is, and I'm not sure that I trust them. You see, so all of these different indicators. So somebody said it was Hillary Clinton, and it's absolutely Hillary Clinton. So just to show you how all of these things can show up in a person's experience, and you see their side of the coin, how they're grappling with everything, how they're trying to deal with everything and push through, and how people then resonate with them as well. All right, are there any questions on any of that? All right. Take your silence as understanding. So will we just take a wee break now and then have a look at some other charts? I think maybe, well, I'll check in with you when we get back, whether we should continue into a new subject or if we want to keep going with this. But let's take a break anyway for 5 minutes. I have 36. That means that we come back at 41. Okay? See you in a bit.